shifted, her laughter cutting off like a record scratching to a halt. Her eyes widened, her lips parting slightly as if she were about to say something. An explanation, an apology, anything, but no words came. The entire room seemed to freeze with her. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips, and a wave of realization rippled through the guests. Jonah's hand, still resting protectively on her stomach, fell away as his expression turned from joy to horror. I could see it in his face, the guilt, the panic, the silent pleading for understanding. But I had none to give. My gaze flickered to my mother, whose shoulders sagged as if she had been holding on to this secret for far too long, dreading the inevitable confrontation. I swallowed, my throat dry, my pulse a deafening drumbeat in my ears. My mind scrambled for an explanation that didn't end in betrayal, but none existed. The banner above them, the balloons, the gifts, they all told a story I had never been given a chance to read. A story that had unfolded in my absence, behind my back, in the home I once believed was mine. Sophia took a hesitant step forward, her hand reaching out, but I stepped back instinctively. The movement felt final, a silent declaration that whatever this was, whatever had happened between them, had shattered something beyond repair. The weight of the moment pressed down on me, suffocating, unbearable. My hands curled into fists, but I wasn't even sure what I was angry at, the deception, the loss, or the sheer unfairness of it all. For weeks, I had dreamt of this homecoming, of seeing Sophia's eyes light up with surprise, of feeling her arms wrap around me, pulling me close. I had longed for the familiarity of her touch, the warmth of our bed, the simple joy of being home. Instead, I stood as an outsider at my own doorstep, watching as my best friend and my wife shared a future that was supposed to be mine. The air felt too thick, the walls too close, the celebration too loud. I needed to leave, to breathe, to escape before the weight of it all crushed me completely. Without another word, I turned on my heel and walked out. No one called after me. Not Sophia. Not Jonah. Not even my mother. And that silence, more than anything, told me everything I needed to know. Jonah kept talking, completely unaware. His voice carried on, filling the room with words that no longer mattered. He kept smiling too, that same easy grin I had once trusted. Last week, we had found out together, celebrating like brothers. And yet, here he was, acting as if he hadn't just shattered my entire existence. I barely noticed my mother rushing toward me, her hands gripping my arm, her voice a desperate whisper. "We weren't expecting you today," she said urgently, as if that made any difference, as if it could erase what I had just seen. My best friend stood in my house, his hands possessively resting on my wife's stomach. I pulled my arm away from my mother's grasp, my voice dangerously low. "How long?" The party had fallen silent. Someone turned off the music. The air grew thick, suffocating. The question hung between us like a blade, sharp and poised to strike. Jonah's hands finally dropped from Sophia's belly, as if he could somehow undo what had already been done. Her face paled, but it was too late. I had seen everything. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a calculated betrayal, a deception woven over time, deliberate and cruel. Now, everyone in the room was waiting to see what I would do. Silence came first. It sliced through the space, killing the laughter, stopping the clinking of glasses. Sophia's mother, who had been lovingly rubbing her stomach moments ago, recoiled in shock. My father, who had been drinking in the corner, refused to meet my gaze. Sophia stood frozen, lips slightly parted, eyes wide with guilt. And Jonah, the man who had been my best friend, the man who once stood beside me through everything, stood there like a coward, looking as if he wished the ground would swallow him whole. "I can explain," Sophia finally whispered, her voice trembling, as if anything in the world could make this right. I clenched my jaw, my fists tightening at my sides. I exhaled slowly, controlling the storm brewing inside me. I would love to hear it. Jonah, for once, had nothing to say. The man who always had an answer, who could talk his way out of any situation, was silent. And my mother, ever the peacekeeper, still tried to salvage the unsalvageable. She pleaded with me to step outside, to not make a scene. But there was no peace left to be found. I turned to Jonah. "You better get a job." His brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" I smiled, slow and cold. Because you're on your own now. Jonah stiffened. Sophia's breath hitched. And then I delivered the final blow. I wasn't just working overseas, I said, watching their faces drain of color. I was consulting a lawyer. Sophia gasped. Jonah's eyes went wide with horror. I let the words sink in before hammering in the last nail. I have proof of every penny I spent on this house, on this marriage. And with that I turned. I walked away, leaving them to sit in the wreckage they had created. The night air hit me like a cold slap as I stepped outside. My hands trembled, whether from rage or shock, I wasn't sure. Behind me, the party had collapsed into stunned silence. It wouldn't last. Soon, the whispers would start. The excuses. The apologies. But I didn't care. Not anymore. For a year, I had worked myself to the bone overseas, building a future for us. And all along they had been doing this. For the first time in years, I felt something close to relief. I was done carrying everything, done breaking my back to hold things together. I was free. That night, I sent Jonah a final message. 2 words. Speak with my lawyer. Then, thinking of everything I had given them, everything they had taken, I turned off my phone. No more explanations. No more chances. The morning before the court battle, everything crashed over me in waves. Some small, barely perceptible, others so overwhelming I could hardly breathe. But one thing was certain. I was finished. It was time to regain control. At precisely 9 a.m., sitting in my motel room, my phone rang. "We're ready, Noah," my lawyer said. I leaned back against the headboard, tightening my grip on the phone. "Guide me through the filing process." Jonah had no legal claim to the house. It was in my name. All financial contributions had been recorded under me. Sophia could contest it, but given the circumstances, it wouldn't stand. "We're filing for an uncontested divorce," my lawyer continued. "She won't be able to access any of your money. If she fights it, we take it to court. But she won't win." I let it sink in. My entire marriage, reduced to financial documents and legal language. It was ironic. I had built everything for our future, and now I was tearing it down in days. "What about my accounts?" I asked. "Already safeguarded. Joint accounts? Frozen. Jonah's possessions? He has no legal claim." Jonah had thought he had one. That he had stolen something from me. But he had no idea. This was just the beginning. That afternoon, the texts started. "Sophia. Noah, I get that you're upset, but can we please talk? I didn't want it to go this way." I ignored it. An hour later, another one. "Sophia. Please, just one conversation. You don't need to do this." She acted as if I was the one destroying our marriage. As if she hadn't already burned it to the ground. Then, Jonah. "Jonah, I know I made a mistake, but I won't let this go. We can figure this out, okay?" I locked my phone. It wasn't mine to fix anymore. The next morning, Sophia must have received the initial documents because her tone shifted. "Sophia. Noah, please, let's talk before this happens." I stared at the message, waiting for the usual ache, the instinct to fix things. But it never came. Instead, I sent one final text to my lawyer. "Make sure Jonah gets nothing." His response was swift. "Believe me, I've got it covered." Days passed. Jonah tried calling. Then, an unknown number. "Marissa." "Noah," she said, "I won't defend her behavior. I raised my daughter better than this. But don't you think you're going a bit too far?" I closed my eyes and shook my head. That was the problem. They still thought I could be reasoned with, that I would forgive, that things would go back to normal. They were wrong. 2 days later, my lawyer informed me Jonah had received his papers. That night, a message. "Jonah. Noah, man, this is crazy. You're making me feel cold." I grinned. Yes, he called. I let it go to voicemail. Then, another text. "Jonah, where should I go?" I stared at the TV, a dark satisfaction creeping in. By the end of the week, everything had begun to crumble for them. Sophia wasn't just losing a husband. She was losing her financial security. Jonah wasn't just losing a friend. He was losing the free ride he had enjoyed for years. And I was taking it all back. Months passed. Jonah was couch-surfing at Marissa's. Sophia had no choice but to rely on him. The cracks began to show. Then, a final message from an unknown number. Sophia, I left him. I read it, not with regret, not with sadness, just quiet, undeniable satisfaction. Because in the end, karma did the rest. And I enjoyed every second of it.